Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Clint, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to play 9 card rally run. First, let's go through the components. This game requires 9 of the cards included in the sheet. You're going to print them and cut them into a standard poker sized card, and it will have this layout. I'm going to tell you about the anatomy of this card later on, but for now, let's move on to the other component. So you have 9 cards, and you have to print this play area, or you can play without the play area. Maybe I can teach you later how to play without this play area, but this is included. You can print this, and it has some guides and some sort of basically it's just a guide. And then you have to have 3 white dice, 1 green die, 1 yellow die, and 1 blue die. So the green represents your gear, the gear of your car. This is the number of movement your car will move in a single turn. That means this is the number of dice you must place on the board. Now the yellow die represents the timer, and you are going against the time. In this game, if it reaches 0, it's game over. And the blue die represents the control, your overall control of your car. So as the faster you go, it decreases, and the slower you go or the safer you drive, it increases. All right. So yeah, those are the components, and let's go through the setup. To set up the game of 9 card rally run, take the 9 cards, 9 road cards, shuffle them up, and place them above here on the road cards area. The road card will have a back that guides you on which dice you can use on the lanes. So I will tell you more about that later. Next, you place your white dice here on the unused dice area. You set your green die to 1. Set your yellow die to 6. This is the timer. And your control to 6. Next, you will draw your first road card and place it on the road A card, road A slot here. Okay. Now draw the next card and put it in the road B card. Now, as you can see, road B must always be vertically oriented. Now, if this doesn't make sense, the road A must be rotated, not the road B. So now you're ready to make sense of the road, and now it is connected properly. Okay, now let me talk to you about the anatomy of a card. So let's take the simplest card here, the straight one. Yeah. So anatomy of a card. A card has lanes, 3 lanes, the left, the middle, and the right. Now each lane has a space. It can be 3 to 4, some even has 1 or 2. So in this case, your left lane has 3 spaces, your right lane has 3 spaces, your middle lane, instead of having 4 spaces, including this half space here, it only has 3 spaces because one of it is blocked because of the tree. Now that is a road card. Now some road cards will show numbers like this one. So that means this number is a speed limit. And this is like a game rule. If you don't follow this rule of speed limit, you're going to have an accident. So I will talk about accidents later. But for this one, this is a speed limit. If you move away from this space, but your gear is more than that, is greater than the number displayed here, that means you are going above the speed limit. What else do we have on the cards? Aside from speed limit, you have the blockings here. You are getting blocked, so you cannot move to that space. And yeah, that's basically it. Speed limit and blocks. All right, so lastly, as part of the setup, you will place if you're not using a car token or a car miniature, you will use your gear die as your car. So this acts as both as your gear tracker and also your car tracker. You must place your car at the bottommost space of the middle lane, which is in this case, let me rotate so it makes sense to you. This is the middle lane, this is the left lane, this is the right lane. So I place my car in the bottommost space of the middle lane. And that is the setup. You're good to go. Alright, time to learn how to play 9-card rally run. To make it simple, I changed the first card here, the road A card, to be a straight card instead of the left turn. So I changed it just for simplicity's sake. So at the start of your turn, you may change your gear by 1. So from 1, I can change it to 2. And then if it's currently 2, I can change it to 3 or 1. All right. So I can only do it once. If I want to do it another time, I can pay a control. So for example, at the start of the turn, I want to start at gear 3. That means I have to pay 1 control to increase it for another time. So usually you go from gear 1 to gear 2, okay? By the way, let me go through the objective of the game. So the objective of the game is to reach the finish line, which means going through all the 9 road cards. Now, after going through all the 9 road cards, you will count your score. Your score consists of your timer multiplied by 2 and the remaining control. In such cases, this is an example case, 6 points plus 3, that is 9 points. If ever during the game your timer reaches 0 or this gets removed because there's no 0 in a dice, the game is over immediately. All right. So with that objective set, let's go through your turn. So first, I already mentioned, first thing you can do at the start of your turn is to change your gear. Okay. Next, after that is the actual turn. In the actual turn, you take your 3 dice and you roll it. After rolling, simply place it here in the unused dice, and then you will start to place it on the cards to represent the trajectory or the movement of your car. So for movement, each die value represents the movement to the lanes. So for the left lane, you can use 1 or 2 to go there. For the middle lane, you can use a value 3, 4 to go to the middle lane. To go to the right lane, you can use the value 5 or 6. So in this case, I rolled 1, 1, and 3, 1 here and 1 here. Now, since my gear is 2, I cannot place this anymore. So that what I demonstrated here is placing of the die. There are 3 things you can do during your turn and after rolling. You can place the die, that just like what I did here. You can reserve the die, or you can use it to manipulate your die value using the die, placing the die, or reserving the die. So this is what I demonstrated here is placing of the die. I just simply placed it on the lane so that my car will later be able to move on that lane. So I'm going to talk to you about reserve and manipulate later on. So let's focus on placing the die first. So placing the die here, after placing all of the required dice, which in this case is 2 because 2 is the current gear, I will proceed to the movement phase. For the movement phase, you start with the die, the movement die nearest to your car. So in this case, this is 1. You will check if the value passes the requirement of the lane. In this case, the lane requirement is 1, 2. This passes the lane requirement because this is a 1. So I'm going to remove that die and I'm going to move my car there. I'm going to repeat the same step for here. So 1 passes the requirement of 1 for the left lane. So I'm going to remove that die and I'm going to move my car there. Okay, so that is the movement phase. After the movement phase is going to be the end of the round. At the end of the round, check if you are on the road B card, because this is the road A and this is the road B. If you are not on the road B card, you don't have to do anything with the cleanup of the road. So let's say I ended here, okay, regardless of my gear. So I ended on the road B card. First thing you will do is, this is already a past card, a past road card. So first thing you will do is you will remove the road A card, set it to the side, and you will slide down the road B to the road A card. Now that road B card becomes the road A card, and you will draw. If there's a deck here, there's a card in the deck. You will draw the next card and put it in the road B, and then afterwards you will check your gear. If your gear is gear 3, you will increase the timer, meaning you save time. If your gear is on gear 2 or gear 1, your timer reduces by 1. That means you used up time because you're not going fast enough. Also, if your gear is on gear 3, your control will be reduced. If your gear is on gear 2, your control will be increased by 1. Now, if my gear is on gear 1, timer still decreases by 1. However, the control increases by 2. That means you're driving very safe and your control is increasing. Later on, I will tell you more about the use of control when I talk about using dice. So that is the end of round. And that's how you play 9-card rally run, simply by knowing that. Next thing that we will discuss is using a die, reserving a die, and using control. And lastly, before we end this video, I'm going to tell you about winning the game and accidents. All right, now that we discussed placing a die and moving your car on the road card, let me go through the depths of the rule, right? So when you roll, you must use at least one die, okay? So this goes with placing a die, using a die, or reserving a die. So placing a die, if I use this die to place here, that is a requirement, okay? I cannot just choose not to place a die here. Why is it important? Because you can re-roll twice. So after rolling the initial roll, so let's say I rolled this and I didn't like it, okay? I can re-roll this. However, there's a rule that I have to place at least one die after a roll. So after rolling this, I place a 4 here. Now I can still place a 3 here, but let's say I didn't like it. Let's say it's a 1. Let's say it's a 1 and it's not useful to us. I can reroll that because I already placed a die here. So I can reroll that and continue placing. Now, let's say I still didn't like this. I still rolled the 2, right? So I want to reroll that. However, that's not possible because I have to place one die at least. Place it, reserve it, or use it. So in this case, this is very, very useless. And if I put it here, it's not going to work. If I put it here, it's going to work. I'm just going to reserve it. Okay? So now we talked about reserving. What does a reserve die do? A die that you reserve is considered as utilized. That means you can now continue rerolling. Okay, what else does a reserve die do? A reserve die can be used later in your turn. One more benefit of the reserve die is that in the next round, let's say this was not used, it was only reserved. In the next round, you may choose not to roll this die. So you can only just roll these 2 and this is as is. That means you can plan ahead. All right. So that is the use of the reserve. So let's talk about using a die. So in our example earlier, this is 4, right? And that works. That works 4 here because the requirement of the middle lane is 3 or 4. However, let's say after re-rolling, after placing my die here in the reserve, I re-rolled and I rolled a 6. Now 6 would not be usable to me because this is not a space on the lane. And if I put it here, it's going to be a failure because it's a 3 or 4. It's going to be an accident. So what I can do is I can use a die to subtract or to add value to an existing die or to a die that's already placed. So in this case, I can use my reserve die to subtract 2 from the 6 and it will become a 4. And I will put that in the use die area. And now, that is using your die. So using die, adjust your already placed dice on the card. it is also possible during roll. So in this case, let's say our speed is 2, our gear is 2, and I placed a 4 here, right? And let's say I don't want to risk rolling again. Since the requirement in the middle lane is 3 or 4, I can just put 2 here, and then I can just use the other die. So 2 will become 3. So that is how you use a die. That is how you reserve a die, and that's how you place a die. Now, this is also related to using. We also have control. You can use control to do that. You can use control to adjust a die's value, like what we did in using a die. But in control, you have more flexibility because in our case, let's say you have 5 control, right? And I rolled only 1 here. And I want to go here, right? 1 is an empty space. So I can place the 1 here and I can subtract 2 control to add it to the die. So that is how you use control. You reduce your control and you will add or subtract the same amount to an already placed die. So that's how you use control. It literally gives you control of your dice. Okay? So that is how you use, you place, you reserve, you re-roll, and you mitigate your dice using control. So how do you win a game of 9-card rally run? To win a game of 9-card rally run, you have to go through all of the 9 road cards. If there is no more card above here in the road cards, you slide down the road B card to become the road A card, and it's forever going to be the road A card. You will never have another road B card. And as you will notice in the player area, there is a guide and there is a generic lane here with spaces that would help you in finishing the game. Okay, so why is this important? To finish the game, to cross the finish line, is you have to move out of the card. So in this view, from here, I have to move out of the card to be able to win. There are 2 types of finishes, a clean finish and an unclean finish. And I'll tell you more about that later after I explain how you finish the game. So in this case, if I go here and if I go here, that would finish the game for me immediately. Okay? And as you can see, my gear is 2, so I have to place 2 dice there, and this will be unused. However, if my gear is 3, I am forced to use 3 dice, even though I already crossed the finish line using the second die. Okay, so that is strict rule in terms of gear. Okay, now let's talk about clean finish and unclean finish. So unclean finish, let's talk about the effect first. If you go for unclean finish, you will increase your timer by 1. If you do unclean finish, you will reduce your timer by 1. When you finish the game, you will not proceed to the end of round steps. The only way to gain a time is to do a clean finish. So how do you do a clean finish? A finish is clean when you don't change the lane from the space where you get off the card. So in this case, I will get off the card from this space, and if I keep the same lane as that space, so in this case is 3 or the middle lane, that is a clean finish. An example of an unclean finish is when I switch lanes here. So from here, and then I switch lanes. That is an unclean finish. So I finished, but not on the same lane that I moved out of the card from. Okay, I hope that is clear. But maybe this is much clearer if I do it here without the guideline of the play area. So let's say I am here, right? So if I want a clean finish, I have to do this one and that one. Okay, so they are on the same lane. Now, if I do this, I can still finish here, but that would be an unclean finish because I switch lanes. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Okay, so in this last topic of 9-card rally run, we're going to be talking about accidents. So in this game, there are 3 types of accidents. We have loss of control, overspeeding, and engine stall. So let's talk about loss of control first because this is more common. So loss of control happens when you do not meet the requirement of a lane. So for example, this is 2, right? So the left lane accepts 1 or 2, but let's say you place 3 there and you didn't have a choice because you rolled very, very badly and you have no control to manipulate the value. So say this is 6. The moment you check the requirement, so this passes, okay, good. Now this one, you check the requirement, it failed. That's where the loss of control happens. Okay, so what happens if you do loss of control? You still move your car into that space, but the timer will immediately decrease by 1 and your turn ends. You will proceed to the end of turn. Next is overspeeding. So let's say here I am on gear 3. Overspeeding means moving out of the space with a number here with the limit with a gear greater than the number. Okay. So in this case, we have 2 and my gear is 3. So let's say I move here, 2, 3, right? 2, 3, and then I move again one more time. I move 3 here. Okay. So that's 1, that's 2, and then see here, this is number 2, but I'm still number 3. So if I move out of that, that overspeeding triggers. That's an overspeeding accident. So what happens when you overspeed? First thing that you will do is you will return your car to that space. You will set your gear to match that number. So this, in this case, is number 2. So you go back to gear 2 and your turn ends. So that's how overspeeding affects you. Now, lastly is engine stall. So remember the rule on the gear is that's the number of dice you must place and also the maximum of dice you must place, but it's not the minimum. So here's the catch. Let's say I am on gear 3, right? So I have to put 3 dice. However, if I put, let's say, 2 here, and then the last die I rolled is a 6, doesn't make sense. I cannot even use it. So if I put it here, it's gonna be a loss of control. If I put it here, it's a loss of control. Let's say I didn't use it. What happens here is my gear is 3, but I only moved twice. So that is an engine stall. So what happens on an engine stall? Engine stall is you set your gear to 1 because your engine just stopped. There's no time penalty here, but next turn, you cannot increase your gear. So you will stay on gear 1 for the next turn. So that is pretty bad. Now, let's say you want to, let's say for example, your gear is 1 and you want to use 3 dice. You cannot do that. Okay, that is not allowed. Never. Okay, you cannot do that. And that is the accident. Now, let me tell you about the movement rules. Okay, so we have adjacency and we have always ahead and things like that. So let me talk about that. The movement rules. These are the rules that you must follow when moving your car or when placing your die, because your placement of dice on the road card represents your car's movement. So first of all, the path. Okay, so the first die you place here, obviously, has to be adjacent to your car. Now, the next die that you will place on the card has to be adjacent to the last die that you placed. It doesn't have to be adjacent to your car. It has to be adjacent to the last die that you placed. So this represents a continuous movement of your car. All right? So that is the first rule. Next is adjacency. So you are adjacent to a lane if your car this is in a space that shares an edge or a border with another space in a lane. So in this case, I am here. The lanes that are adjacent to me are in this lane, this lane, this space, this space, this space, this space, and this space, as well as this space. This is adjacent to me. If I'm here, I'm only adjacent to lane M. I'm not adjacent to lane R. So that is how adjacency works. And there's also a rule that the car must always move forward. It can never go backwards. So what is a forward space? A forward space is a space that is at least one edge is ahead of your current space. So in this case, this is my space. The spaces that are ahead of me is this one and this one because they have an edge here that is ahead of my space. So this space here is not ahead of me. And then the speed limit, I already mentioned to you the speed limit. But there's also a rule of a speed limit commitment. You can see this one. Let's put it here. Okay. So you can see this one. Once you go to a lane, once you go to a space with a speed limit, you cannot go switching spaces. Okay. So that is called speed limit commitment. Now, if there's no speed limit, then you can switch. So in this case, this is a much safer left turn. If I am here, I can go here. No problem with that. If I am here, I can go there because that is not a speed limit area. Okay? Only speed limit going to speed limit is not allowed. Okay? Yeah, that is everything. Now you know how to play 9-card Rally Rat. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the game and don't forget to leave a feedback so I can continuously improve this game. Thank you very much. Goodbye.